Hey folks, just, just thought I would share some thoughts this evening. Kind of bored, don't have anything else to do. Thought I would do a hangout and got feedback. Let me get the feedback away. There we go. Okay. So, just wanted to share my thoughts about uh, worldviews, things of interest. Recently I uploaded a video called the Genetic Information Challenge, a challenge to those who are proponents of evolutionism who claim that, like Aaron Ra and many others, who claim that science actually supports evolution and that the Bible is it's a bunch of sheep herder myths and none of it's true. But I provided a challenge in recently that cannot, no matter what anybody says, no matter what atheist says, well, I met that challenge, they're wrong. It cannot be met, because it elucidates certain facts that are irrefutable, and these facts prove creation is true for all living things. It's a remarkable thing that since the days of Charles Darwin, modern scientific discoveries have verified that life, in fact, was intelligently designed and created. That's a remarkable thing. And but if you think about it, it's not surprising so much. Evolution was an idea that was put forth in a day when people rode horses and lighted the streets with oil lamps. This was even before gas lamps. Charles Darwin published his infamous book in 1859. So uh, we would expect with modern technology, modern science to make astonishing discoveries, as it has, about biological life. And those discoveries have refuted the naturalistic idea that um, pure chemical, pure chemistry is the designer of all the fantastic features of all the living systems in this world. So that challenge cannot be met because it is simply a fact that genetic information defines, prescribes the features and biochemical functions of all life. The biology and the features of living things are all prescribed by genetic information. And information proves creation, and it proves that there is an intelligence that has done the prescribing, that created those forms by prescribing their chemistry, their biochemistry, and their functions. If you hear pauses, it's because I'm doing something. I'm just waiting for my thoughts to come to me. Now, I hear all kinds of arguments against the Christian worldview come up. Arguments from, I'm just going to ramble and share some thoughts. One of the arguments that I heard in a debate recently on Modern Day Debates channel was about, we hear this from atheists all the time. This argument that Jesus said uh, that these things will not be, the Son of Man will not return till all these things be fulfilled. And they'll say, well, see, that's failure. Jesus, till this, what is he? What was the actual passage? This generation shall not pass away until all these things are fulfilled. And the atheist says, well, see, the Bible is just wrong because those things didn't happen while those people were still standing there, were still alive. But that's just an example of terrible reading comprehension. When Jesus said this generation, he wasn't speaking of the 50-year lifespan, of the average person that was living on the earth at the time. This generation is referring to a span of time. And so it wasn't that Jesus was saying these things would happen before you guys here are going to fall dead. And then atheists also use this failed argument. They constantly say, See, these bacteria gain immunities, therefore evolution is true. Because look, change happens. Genetic change happens, therefore evolution is true. That's such a worn out, tired failure of an argument. It becomes so tiresome and boring for creationists to have to refute some of the ridiculous, worn out, tired old arguments of evolutionists. It really does. Because, uh, I mean, if someone was simply to apply their mind to it and think about it, they would realize that gaining an immunity of a bacteria doesn't help evolution theory at all. I mean, sure, that would be a process. If evolution were true, maybe evolution could account for that. Maybe. But of course, in truth, it couldn't, of course. I mean, somatic mutation of the immune system is ingenious and it's algorithmic. That's the end of that. But nonetheless, um, the evolutionist isn't really thinking about. See, they're grabbing for straws because they need to point to something that gives them they can use as an argument for evolution. Something, anything. And so they'll point to immunities in bacteria as though that's an argument for evolution. But it's this. But if you just think about what the claim is for a second, you realize that it doesn't provide an argument for evolution at all. Changing the a bacteria gaining an immunity to antibiotics doesn't support the idea that evolution puts forth that organisms change in their structural design in such a way that fundamentally new types of living things arise that didn't exist before. That a whale comes into existence from a dog-like creature, or that a fish begats over time through enough generations, these creatures transform into something that walks on land with legs and lungs. That's what evolution claims. Bacteria gaining an immunity have no effect on the structural design of the animal, of the bacteria. They don't move it one tiniest bit towards becoming anything other than what it is. So it doesn't support evolution. But evolutionists continuously put forth this kind of argument because that's really all they have. If they had something better, they'd use it. But that's all they have. It just is so ridiculous. I mean, every time a creationist sees an evolutionist say, "Yeah, well, if only God would stop making bacteria that gained immunities," and the creationists, just their eyes just roll in their head like, "Oh, great Scots, are you serious?" Because it doesn't support evolution theory one iota. How is it that the evolutionist cannot see that? Well, it's not that they can't see it if they stop to think about it. It's that this is all they have. So that's what they have to use. Whatever, the only thing they can come up with. Any kind of change, thus evolution must be true. See, because a bacteria can change, well then, ducks arise from a non-duck. Really? That's not even in the same category, that kind of change. It's a completely different category of change. One's a biochemical, and the other is a structural design change that doesn't relate to anatomy at all. I mean, the biochemical one doesn't relate to anatomy. But this is what evolutionists throw out there because that's all they have. I've been doing Christian apologetics for about 11 years. Well, let's see, 11 years or so. And I have never heard an argument from an evolutionist that was truly scientific. And it seems all of their arguments against the scriptures, when they argue against Christianity, are taking passages grotesquely out of context. If I've said it before many times, if atheists would apply the same reading comprehension and intellect to the Bible when they approach it, that they do the texts they're required to read in high school or even college, they would fail those classes. They wouldn't make a passing grade. Their teacher would look at their paper and say, "What in the world? You're completely ignoring all the context of what this line, this book is talking about. What are you thinking?" And that's what creationists Christians do. We hear these failed, repeated arguments over and over, and our eyes just roll in our heads, just like, "Oh, please already. Are you kidding me? Again with this?" I mean, so is it that these people are ignorant, that they can't see that they're ignoring all the context? No, that's not it. It's not, I don't believe that all the atheist evolutionists are so stupid that they can't see the context. It's that their mind is tied up in chains in a box. And so they become instantly satisfied with something that appears on its face value to contradict something in the Bible, or to look a certain way. I mean, if there was an article written, and if we were to take a historical document that said, and then Napoleon, or let's anything, just so then the soldiers lost ground. Oh, well, they lost the battle. They lost the war. Really? No, keep reading. They just lost a little ground. 6 hours later, they made an advance and they took over. They forced the enemy to retreat considerably, and destroyed them as they were retreating. It was a victory. But you just read that one line that says they lost ground, and that was just a temporary thing. That's kind of the way the atheists approach the Bible. Oh, look, the Bible passage says this. Oh, then obviously, see, and just completely ignore everything else about what it's talking about. But the atheist becomes instantly satisfied to do that because they're looking for something that can quell their conscience. You see, if they're so desperate for something that's going to silence their conscience, anything on its surface value that seems to do it, oh, that's good enough. Oh, yeah. See, it's like a little fix. That's why they do that. And so it causes them to make dumbed down, unintellectual arguments when it comes to the Bible, because they're only looking for a little tiny fix for their addiction to their idea that they can silence their conscience. That's all they're looking for. Lots of little fixes, like a drug addict. Just wants another little hit or another little prick, and that'll satisfy me for now. That's the way they treat the Bible. So um, uh, that's the way I see it. When now Vladimir is in the chat, and he says, "You made fun of a book written a century ago or two, and yet you put all your trust in one written 2 millennia ago. So, are you saying that Because okay, so I said that Darwin's book deals with scientific knowledge. Okay, obviously that's what it's about. And man had very little, no biological scientific knowledge at the time. Virtually nothing was known biological science. I mean, man knew other things in other fields of science, astronomy and mathematics and engineering and physics. Had certain knowledge about certain things in the days of Charles Darwin, but knew almost nothing at all about biology. And that's what that book is about, essentially. It's about biology. And it was a lot of false ideas about something man knew almost nothing about. That's not the case with the Bible. By the way, the Bible does possess scientific foreknowledge. It's not a science book, but it possesses about a dozen, actually about 4 or 5 dozen passages that allude to things that are scientific foreknowledge. It actually describes particle physics in one way. It describes the fact that light travels distance over time, an idea that nobody had in the days of Charles Darwin. I mean, and in the time it was written, 1450 BC. Um, Sir Isaac Newton was the first person to write about the idea in his thesis, Optics, in 1705. Talks about hydrothermal vents on the ocean floor. Tells us the stars were innumerable, impossible for anybody to have known 1450 BC or 1100 BC. Tells us the universe is expanding. It tells us that the ice caps, the ice sheets that cover the oceans in the Arctic were produced by the flood of Noah, and that the mountains of the earth have been rolled and folded. A lot of things. It's not about science, but it happens to tell us a number of things in science that were foreknowledge, things that man couldn't possibly have known. And of course, it possesses hundreds of fulfilled prophecies, which verify it as knowledge provided by somebody who has complete knowledge of the history of the world beforehand. Now, then somebody will say, an atheist will say, no, there's no such thing as fulfilled prophecy in the Bible. But the problem is, there is. There's an awful lot of it. Dr. Dan Olinger said one time, um, he's a Christian apologist, PhD theologist, says, um, atheists have to believe that the prophecies fulfilled in the Bible were created after the fact, because that's how accurate they are. It's the only place they can go. That the guys wrote the prophecy fulfilled because they read something in the Old Testament, and oh, look, we're going to write a fake thing and make it look like it was fulfilled. That's what the atheist has to believe, because that's the only place they can go. Because the prophecies, some of them are so accurate that that's the only thing they can do. Well, that's just an acknowledgement that the prophecy is fulfilled. Now, if you're going to claim they conspired to fulfill it, boy, what a can of worms you're going to open there. I'd be happy to elucidate with somebody how that's an irrational idea. If you really think that the New Testament authors, the apostles, conspired to write fake up a bunch of stories they found in the Old Testament and claim they came true in the historical man Jesus Christ, then you put forth a really crazy bag of tricks, because you just can't support that idea. And it's completely nonsense to believe that. Once you start thinking about it and realize the argument you've put forth, you'll start to realize what a problem that is for yourself. One of the things that I find so astonishing about uh, evolutionists who are atheists is the fervence with which they defend evolution theory and they argue for it today in any venue that they can find. They're very militant about it because they're protecting their religion. So evolutionism is part of their atheist religion. I know the atheist will say, well, that's atheism isn't a religion. Well, of course it is. It has tenets. Religion, one of the definitions of religion is a set of beliefs held to with order and faith, a set of institutionalized beliefs held to with ardor and faith. And that describes atheism. It also describes evolutionism. So evolutionism is a religion. I know Kent Hovind said that many years ago, and a lot of people balked at it and they scoffed, but he's right. It is, of course, a religion. It even portends to tell us where we came from and where we're going, just like any religion. And what's the meaning of life? According to evolutionists, the meaning of life is simply to pass on your genes. The sole purpose of a human being is to pass on their genes, just to reproduce and leave a record that they've been here, to create a new one like themselves. That's all humans' life is worth, according to evolution. According to atheism, it's worth even less, because a human being is nothing but a soulless mistake produced by the cosmos that doesn't have life in it because it's a soulless one, and it's just absolutely turns back into dust and has no meaning, and the stars will forget it was ever there. They never knew. In fact, the stars don't even know it's there. They don't think either, and that's it. You're a nothing. So why should we not think atheism is child abuse when an atheist tells a child they're a soulless mistake that has no meaning, no intrinsic value other than the chemical value of whatever nickel and manganese and iron could be extracted from their dead flesh? Because that's what atheists want children to believe. Isn't that child abuse? Seems terribly abusive to me. To tell a child should be criminal. To tell a child they're a soulless meat mistake produced by the cosmos. There's no intrinsic value to their life. And when they die, the cosmos will never know they've been there. It'll be as though they never existed, and nothing they've done or said or believed or felt in their whole life will mean anything and have any value that carries over anywhere. It's just gone. It was worth nothing. And you came and went without anything meaning anything to your life, having no meaning. That should be criminal. I mean, if some of the laws that we have in books about child abuse are valid ones, then that should certainly be a valid one too. To tell a child such a thing as that is child abuse. To cause a child to grow up believing those things is abusive. Compare that to what scriptures teach, to what God teaches about the value of human life. Oh, they are a completely different class. According to God, a human being is of immense value. Scripture says that the angels of heaven sing for joy when a single sinner repents. Isn't that amazing? And of course, that's amazing. But compare that to what the atheist would have you believe. You're a soulless meat mistake created by the cosmos, no value, and you're just going to turn into dust, and it's as though you never existed when it's all said and done. Compare that to what God says about you in the Bible. Amazing. What a contrast. I mean, that's a shocking difference. Really, truly is a shocking difference. So here's an interesting thing. Evolutionists will dig up a beaver fossil and they'll say, gee, this thing looked awful beaver like. Because they don't want to admit it's a beaver. Because it hasn't changed anatomically in, millions of years since the age of dinosaurs. Hey, but everything seems to change, right? Evolution is true, right? In the 65 million years since dinosaurs went extinct, all kinds of creatures have come into existence that didn't exist before, according to evolutionists. So how come beavers haven't changed? So they'll say they won't acknowledge it's a beaver. They'll say, gee, this fossil is awful beaver-like. There was a beaver-like creature that lived prior to beavers. Truth is, it's just a beaver. The same thing with deer and everything else that they point to. Living fossils. Evolutionists misrepresent the fossils that are discovered on a regular basis. They do this all the time. They do this because they don't want you to think about the fact that the animal hasn't changed in millions of years. Because that's not non evolution. Where's the evolution in that? So they'll find a creature like a, a crow or a cormorant or an owl or an egret or a pelican or a penguin or any living fossil, and they'll find a fossil of it and they'll say, gee, this was awfully like a penguin. Looks like penguin-like creatures that preceded penguins were awfully close to penguins back then. It's just a penguin. It's not penguin-like, it is a penguin. But even if it were like a penguin, where's the evolution? And so evolutionists misrepresent the fossils this way. And they love to do this with the articles that they put in the secular media, news articles and whatnot. Because this is how they try to fix evolution theory. The problem of living fossils. Living fossils are creatures which have not changed one iota from their counterparts in the fossils. In other words, we find a fossil example of that organism and we compare it to a modern one, and the only difference between them might be something like size and a little bit difference in shape. A slight difference in morphology, a little variation, just like the differences between dogs, often less, much less than the breeds of dogs, often much, much less than that. And or the differences between a mule deer and a great white, a white-tailed deer. Differences like that. And they'll say, see, this was deer-like. No, it's a deer. It's a beaver. But they don't want to say it's a beaver because that means, oh, well, it hasn't changed. They have to twist everything to make it look like evolution is true. It's always going on. And so it can't be actually a beaver. It's got to be, well, that's beaver-like. The truth is, it's just a beaver. So they'll point out the fact that the fossil they found of a beaver has a little bit longer muzzle than the typical beaver today. Otherwise, it's identical to a beaver. And they'll say, gee, that's awful beaver-like. But it's just a beaver. It's just variation. That's not structural design change. That's not evolutionary change. It's got a little bit longer muzzle than the typical beaver that lives today. All it shows is the present population of beavers on the earth today have a muzzle that's a little bit shorter than the ones that lived thousands of years ago in the past. That's all it shows. That's not evolution. See? That's stasis. That's what secular anthropologists and geologists call stasis, which means non-change to the structural design of the organism. And so there are tens of thousands of living fossils. The fossil record shows that creature has either gone extinct or still exists with slight changes in variation, slight differences, but anatomically it's the same animal. So all the fossil record shows is creatures still exist or they're extinct. Every fossil of a creature that's found in the fossil record that's still living today is called a living fossil because it still exists. The animal still exists without any kind of structural design anatomical difference. They call them living fossils. They're tens of thousands. All kinds, from insects, mammals, marsupials, reptiles, fish, tens of thousands of living fossils. And then there's the ones that are extinct. We can find them in the fossils, but they don't live on this planet anymore. T-Rex, Triceratops, Deinonychus, uh, you know, Allosaurus, all kinds of other things. Ichthyostega, you know, these creatures, lots of them. They're extinct. So creatures, the fossil record shows creatures are either extinct or they're still with us with slight variation. But slight variation doesn't show evidence of evolution. It shows non-change. But so then when the evolutionists do these little write-ups in their secular art news articles, you'll see them all over the place on the internet. They put one at least on in a major news outlet at least once a month. They'll find a creature that's very much like one that exists today, and they'll say, gee, this creature looks an awful lot like an owl. It's owl-like. Truth is, it's an owl. That's all. But they have to call it owl-like or beaver-like, beaver-like. Because they have to point out, that's changed. That means it's evolving. It wasn't really a beaver. It was just beaver-like. But the truth is, when you examine the fossil, it's 100% beaver. That's all there is to it. But they have to put that twist of the dashed like on the end when they talk about these things they discover, these fossils. When they discover another living fossil, and they would need to put forth the idea of evolution. Hey, we got to twist this to make it look like evolution somehow. Oh, I know, dash like. Yeah, remarkable. That beaver-like creature was found. That'll make them think it's changing. That's how they do it. They twist. It's called fake news. Be back in just a minute. Okay, so I'm back. I don't really know what I want to talk about tonight. Just about anything. I'm surprised anybody's listening. It used to be that a lot of people listen to what I have to say. Now, very few people do, and I think that's the reason. I'm just honest. The reason is because I've refuted all the outspoken atheists, the evolutionists that use the internet to put forth arguments on YouTube and Google, and they got tired of being refuted by me, and they don't pay attention anymore. That's the biggest reason. Several years ago, I could start a hangout and there'd be 100 people watching it. Um, so there'd be 100 people watching, and there'd be 20 people wanting to join. But now it's hard for me to get anybody or have anybody listen. And I don't think that's because, actually I'm better at what I do than I was then. The difference is because they got tired of being refuted by me, and they realized that they can't stand up against me in evolution or debate about Christianity or the Bible or something. And so they just give up on it. They kind of concentrate on the those who are less able, I think. I think that's what's happened. I remember one time there was a fellow named Don Exis too, a very outspoken young evolutionist who who uh, challenged me to I challenged to a debate about evolution, and he accepted my challenge. Then he started going through all these things, trying to make different rules about it. Well, we got to say this, and it's got to be this, and that, and the other, and setting all these rules. And I'm just like, okay, well, whatever. Okay, well, I'll bend on that. Okay, whatever. And I got him to consent. Okay, we'll do it. And then instead of showing up for his debate, he ran off to an atheist talk show called the Magic Sandwich Show, which I think is about gone now, or kind of unpopular anymore. It used to be much more popular, but and he ran off to it to hang out with his buddies instead of showing up for his debate. Then had the gall to turn around and say that I didn't show up for my debate. Lie about it and say I didn't show up for my debate. And I had an atheist with a stopwatch waiting in the chat room there, waiting for him to show up, and he never showed. But he turned around and claimed that I ran from the debate. When truth is, he ran from the debate right to an atheist talk show and never showed up for his debate. The way atheists misrepresent things is just astonishing to me. They did this to my friend Standing for Truth recently on the Magic, on what is this atheist talk show? They did it to him. They said, Steve McRae, who's an extremely dishonest person, an atheist who hangs out on that show a lot, talks over people who are in debates that he's not actually a part of. Um, he did this to Standing for Truth recently. He said that they invited Standing for Truth to join their non sequitur show, the atheist non sequitur show, and when he didn't show up, they declared that he ran from debate. The truth is, he simply never agreed to show up to join their show at all in the first place. So they can just, what they do is they just invite you to show up, and if you don't show up, they claim you're a chicken and ran from debate. That's the games these people play. It's crazy. Can you believe this? That's how utterly dishonest these people are. It's shocking. How in the world do they get away with this intellectually in their own minds, much less in somebody else's? And then to believe that other people, and to see atheists make posts in support of that idea. Yeah, man, he ran from debate because we asked him to show up and he didn't, therefore he ran. See, that's just mindless. The truth was, Standing for Truth was just busy and couldn't, and wouldn't have mattered even if he hadn't wanted to. That doesn't mean he's afraid to and didn't show up. He never agreed to show up. You can only run from a debate that you've agreed to join. You can't be afraid to debate and run from a debate and be a coward if you never agreed to show up in the first place. Just somebody makes a video and says, we invited him, and if he doesn't show up, he's a coward. How ridiculous that is. How childish. And how dishonest. But that's what these guys are doing. I mean, when you have to resort to that kind of tactic, what's it say about something going on? It says something about what's going on with you, right? I mean, you're desperate. You're hurting in some way. They're hurting. Hurting from all the years of Christian apologetics that have ruined all their arguments. And they're desperately clinging and grasping for straws. They've got to have something to put down the creationists for. And, that kind of dishonest tactic, if it's, if they can employ it, well, they'll try that. Well, I got a friend here who says in Hangout that my videos helped him last year, about 2 years ago. He says in a big way. Checked out what I was saying and I was right. Well, I'm glad that I was able to help in some kind of way. What is it? What is it that helped you in a way? Maybe you could tell me what it is that helped you. Wouldn't mind that feedback. What video or videos or what information I shared that was impactful or made a difference for you in some way. It'd be interesting to hear that. If you're inclined to tell me. I recently uploaded just a couple of weeks ago a genetic challenge. And this is one that atheists will eventually, over time, there'll be probably a number of responses to that video. There's already one or two. And they will claim that they've met the challenge and refuted me. But the truth is they can't. It's impossible. And the reason it's impossible is because what I shared in that video is simply facts. Firstly, DNA is in fact encoded information. That's just the way it is. It really is a fact. What does the atheist say? It's not really information. And what do they say about the DNA code? It's not really a code. Except it is a code. It operates exactly like a code because, well, it is a code. And they'll say, that's not really information in DNA. It just operates kind of like it. There's a chemical effect that you think is information. But the truth is, no, it is information. And they'll go so far then, I've had many of them debate this with me, of course, in error, that information is not even in non-physical. Because they'll go so far as to try to argue that information is a material thing. Because they don't want to believe in the non-physical of anything. They're staunch atheists and they believe in philosophical materialism. So they'll actually argue the information isn't non-physical, just to try to shut off the evidence that biological life is defined by information. That's how far they'll go. Say, information isn't non-physical, it's made of matter. No, it isn't. And they'll say, well, it requires matter. You got to have a medium to convey information. And of course, my response is, yes, that doesn't make the information material. Just means the medium has to be information. I mean, physical. Because, hey, we're stuck in a three-dimensional physical world. If we're going to convey information, it's going to be done in a physical medium because we're in a physical medium. A fish can't get out of the water. How's he going to communicate in water? Because why? Well, he's stuck in the water. How's a fish going to communicate with sound waves? A whale, let's say not a fish, but let's say a porpoise or a whale. How are they going to communicate with sound waves if they don't do it with the water? right? They have to use the water as a medium because they're in the water, right? So human, you know, how are you going to communicate without employing the physical medium in some way when you're stuck in a physical reality? That doesn't make the information material, though. But that's how far they'll go. They'll say the information isn't non-physical because they don't want to believe in the non-physical. Why? Well, because if the non-physical information comes from a non-physical mind, then you got evidence for a soul, and then they can't say we have no reason to believe in the existence of God, a non-physical spirit being with intellect, because we've got evidence for our own soul. See how it works? So we shut all that down by saying there's no such thing as information isn't non-physical. It's actually made of matter. Therefore, see how it works? They shut that down. See, that's what they think they're doing. Kill the whole argument. They shut it out. Cut it down at the root. Get that sticker bush down close to the ground there. Then we don't have to worry about the branches. See, that's how they work. Well, my friend, the person in the chat room, was telling me about the videos of mine that they watched and what impact they made on them. That's amazing. It humbles me. That's awesome. That's great that I've been able to have a little bit of an impact in anybody's thinking or lives by providing information. And that's great. It humbles me to hear that. I appreciate you telling me that. Really does. I've really poured myself into what I do here on the internet with Christian apologetics over the last 10 years, 11, and I do it because it's a labor of love. Because I hate the lies. I hate the lies, and so I appreciate you telling me that. I appreciate it. You never know. Christian apologists really don't have too much direct feedback about the impact that they're making, if any, until I think they get to the point where they're really big time, like have a national audience because they've got a PhD and they, stand in universities. People like William Lane Craig or some of the creationist scientists like Dr. Jeffrey Tompkins or anybody who's on the, an academic with, who can do this on a academic stage. Um, they get an understanding of the impact, I think, that they make. But those of us who don't have the privilege of debating in an academic format, such as an auditorium at a university, we don't get that kind of feedback. But when you've got an audience of 1,100 people and other academics are coming to record you, it's obvious you're making an impact. But for those of us without that privilege, and I don't have that privilege, we don't really know too much about what impact, if any, we're making. We can only hope that we're making some kind of an impact. I know that I'm making an impact. I never really know how much. It probably isn't all that great, but I'm satisfied knowing that I make some impact. And that's good. Look, if one person can come to the truth that creation is a fact, one, and not be an evolutionist, not come out from under the sheep's wool pulled over their eyes and see the truth, and then look at the Bible and say, wow, that's, I, I'm starting to think that's the truth. And then come to believe that's the truth because of something that somebody does, it'd be all worth it, wouldn't it? Well, I appreciate that, friend. Um, It's the truth is just it's that the lies that are put forth by the secular world are so stinking and so filthy and so false that uh, it really got under my skin years ago. It caused me to really think about stuff and made me determined to have a say. That's what got me fired up about doing it. I realized how disgusting and how wrong these lies were and how much an impact these lies were having in the world. And I just felt like doing something about it, whatever little I could do, you know. I wanted to be a part of doing something about it because they're so offensive. The lies put forth by the secular camp today are so utterly offensive because they're so blatantly wrong, and they relate to things that are so utterly important, like the value of a human's life and what they mean, and whether or not God exists, and whether or not they have hope for eternal life. These things are the most important things that there is. That is the most important stuff there is. And these people are attacking it. These are just Satan's ways of attacking the truth. Satan is smart and he's very diligent, and he's put forth lots of false ideas. Evolutionism is one of his biggest games to date, to cause people to not even believe that God exists because God didn't create anything. See, that's the game. If you can get people to believe that nature is its own explanation and nature produced you, then you have no reason to believe in God. That's Satan's game. An interesting thing you'll find in Scripture is the Pharisees said to Jesus, they said, he's possessed by a devil. And that was a fulfillment of Isaiah 53, where Isaiah 53 says that they would claim that he was smitten, meaning he was possessed. So that was a fulfillment of Isaiah 53. Isaiah was written 720 or so years before Jesus Christ was born. So they said, he's possessed by a devil. And then Jesus said, um, well, if Satan cast out Satan, how is this kingdom going to stand? A kingdom divided against itself cannot stand. I mean, it's not even logical. See, he called them out for their illogical nature of their argument. What are you talking about? Satan casting out Satan? It makes no sense, you goofballs. They must have stopped. They must have been, embarrassed when Jesus said that. They're like, oh, crap, you made us look like fools. Think about it, really. What are you talking about? Is Satan casting out Satan? How can his kingdom stand? You buffoons, you know? But then Jesus said, if a man enters wants to spoil, I'm paraphrasing. I'm not quoting the passages correctly. I'm just telling you essentially what Jesus said because I don't remember the verses exactly. But Jesus said, if a man wants to spoil a rich man's house, he wants to steal and rob it. And there's a strong man that lives there. He has to bind the strong man first. Then he can spoil his house. You know what Jesus was doing when he said that? He was essentially saying that I have bound Satan and I am spoiling his kingdom. Isn't that awesome? Now, of course, this means he's God because he has more authority and more power than Satan. He can bind Satan. See? So it's a fulfillment of Isaiah 53, where it says that where the Pharisees claimed that Jesus was possessed by a demon, and it was an explanation. It's also at the same time provides a sort of minor evidence of Jesus acknowledging his own divinity. There are much more profound evidences, acknowledgments of his divinity that he made, but this one is a kind of a minor acknowledgment of his divinity. If there's a strong man there and you want to spoil his house, you got to bind him first, because he's not going to just stand around and watch you stealing from him. He's going to attack you, and he's a strong man, right? So you're going to have to bind him first, then you can steal his house. He'll be lying on the floor all tied up while you're stealing stuff. As long as he's free and his hands and feet are free, good luck stealing from him, right? He's just going to whoop you. So you got to bind him first. Now, to bind the strong man means you're stronger than the man, stronger than the strong man. So Jesus was saying that he is stronger than Satan. And that implies, really, actually, if you think about it, implies infinitely stronger than Satan. And Jesus was acknowledging that he had bound the strong man and was spoiling his house. He had bound Satan and is spoiling his kingdom by preaching the truth and performing the works of God, raising the dead, healing the blind, calming the seas, causing the lame to walk. The things that Jesus said are just amazing. Um, whenever I read the Bible, I'm just shocked by the truth, how beautiful it is, how true it is. And, we hear it from atheists all the time. They'll say, oh, you believe a book written 2,000 years ago. That's what you believe. Well, I believe modern science. Well, that's a false game. Sure, I believe the book written 2,000 years ago. It proves itself true. But that the book that's written 2,000 years ago is not a treatise on evolution. Or creation. Its profound statements about creation are true. But so it's kind of a goalpost move for an atheist to make that argument. That when they say, well, you believe a 2,000-year-old book. Well, have you ever seen a book like the Bible? See, what they won't acknowledge is that the Bible proves itself to be what it says it is, the inspired Word of God. And it absolutely does prove itself to be that. They won't acknowledge that. And that's why they take passages grotesquely out of context to make arguments against it, because if they don't do that, if they employ the context, it refutes their arguments. They have no argument, rather. See, so they have to take things grotesquely out of context. So you have to fake the Bible. They have to make a fake Bible and then attack it. That's a straw man. The atheist arguments against the Bible, all of them are straw man arguments. A straw man argument is where you put some words in a man's mouth and then you shoot him down. And so he said that, or that's what he said he believes. See? That's you create a false argument and that they supposedly said, and then you shoot it down. When that's not exactly what they said or what they believe anyway. So that's called a straw man argument. Atheists do this when it comes to the Bible constantly. And they do it by taking passages out of context, ignoring the context and what the passage is actually alluding to, or the information that surrounds it, and have important things to say about what the passage is saying. When you negate all that, or ignore it, rather, or eliminate it, leave it out, you can attempt to make the Bible say just about anything you want to. and then you can pretend to shoot it down. And that's a straw man. So atheist arguments against the Bible are all straw men. You know, Jesus did this remarkable thing. He was challenged by the Sanhedrin, the Pharisees. They challenged him, and he responded to them with three parables that are actually part of one story. And the three parables were um, the parable of the prodigal son, the parable of the woman and the coin, and the parable of there was one other. I can't remember what it was. But he said all three, and in conclusion, Jesus, by providing all three of these parables, was telling them that he was God manifest in the flesh. They weren't listening. Jesus' response to them was to tell them he is God manifest in the flesh by sharing three parables with them. Were they listening? Probably not. It doesn't look like it. They crucified him for saying he was God. They called him a blasphemer. So, I don't know. I think I'm going to just kill the hangout. Looks like nobody showed up to talk to me. Um, I guess atheists are scared of me nowadays. I know Aaron Raw is. Um, he won't engage me in debate. I would love to have an honest, actual, structured debate with Aaron Raw. I really would. But he won't do that because he doesn't want. He's afraid of the structured debate. Now he'll debate fairly uninformed, reasonably uninformed Christian apologists in Google Hangouts without a moderator. But if somebody challenges him, like if I've challenged him to a structured debate in a Google Hangout, well, no, that's not acceptable. And then you got to have a plane ticket and fly to Texas, and you need somebody to sponsor you and spend thousands of dollars. And then, well, yeah, maybe. That's his way of running from a debate with me. I'm fully convinced he's afraid of that. I mean, if you're willing to debate somebody who's not terribly a good Christian apologist in a Google Hangout without a moderator, but then somebody challenges you to do it with a moderator, and you'll do every dance around the subject and do everything necessary to prevent from agreeing to such a thing, I think it says something. But I would love to debate him in a structured hangout. I can't travel. We could do it in a Google Hangout. I've been challenging for 10 years to do it in a Google Hangout. He won't do that. 10 years he's said no. I can't travel because I have certain responsibilities at home. I can't leave my wife because of medical reasons. I have to be here for every single day, and she can't travel. So there's no way for me to travel. But there's nothing that would prevent Aaron Raw or some of his followers from engaging in structured debate in a Google Hangout. Nothing at all. I mean, some of these people are doing it all the time on Modern Day Debate channel. But how come Aaron Raw won't do it? You know, if he had the truth, and he was so good at what he did, and he had the absolute scientific truth, well, he could just go in there and mop up, right? Just rip everybody to pieces and prove himself to be the king of evolution, creationist Christian stompers. So how come he doesn't do it? Because he's afraid of that venue. where a structured debate where he doesn't have the ability to raise his voice and talk over you and interrupt you constantly and take your mic time away. So he can try to make it look like he's winning the debate. How come Aaron Raw won't debate on Modern Day Debates channel? Isn't that interesting? I think everybody ought to email him and ask him why he won't do it. And then, but why he's willing to engage in non-structured debates with weak creationist apologists, and on the non sequitur show where he can constantly raise his voice and talk over people. He's just a wimp. Well, I'm going to kill the hangout, guys. Thanks for coming and watching. I had a lot of stuff I could talk about, but it's not really a lot of fun doing it by myself, and it probably bore you to tears. So thanks for coming, though, if you did watch, or if you do watch. I appreciate it. And God bless you. Stand strong in the faith. Christ is the truth. Creation is a fact. Both are verified by history, science, and philosophy. And that's just the way it is, like it or not. Thanks. God bless.